tell the story of the cross. We tell it as a story of old that we remember and pass down through generations because of the significance it holds in our life and in our faith. But we also come together today seeking to engage with the story of the cross as if for the first time. Because the truth about the cross is that its message and its significance is real every single day. And so this morning, I invite you to focus once again on the cross. When I survey the wondrous cross on which the Prince of Glory
In the beginning, God created everything, the heavens above the earth and the earth below. Here's what happened. At first, the earth lacked shape and was totally empty, and the dark fog draped over the deep, while God's spirit wind hovered over the surface of the empty waters. Then there was a voice of God. Oh. Say it again. And light flashed into being. God saw that the light was beautiful and good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God named the light day and the darkness night. Evening gave way to morning. That was day 1.
Let there be a vast expanse in the middle of the waters. Let the waters above part from the waters below.
So God parted the waters and formed this expanse, separating the waters from above from the waters below. It happened just as God said, and God called the vast expanse sky. Evening gave way to morning. That was day 2.
Let the waters below the heavens be collected into one place and congregate into one vast sea, so the dry land may appear.
It happened just as God said. God called the dry land earth, and the waters congregated below seas. And God saw that this new creation was beautiful and good.
Earth sprung green vegetation, grow all varieties of seed-bearing plants and all sorts of fruit-bearing trees.
It happened just as God said. The earth produced vegetation, seed-bearing plants, and all varieties of fruit-bearing trees of all sorts. And God saw that his new creation was beautiful and good. Evening gave way to morning. That was day 3.
Lights come out, shine in the vast expanse of heaven's sky, dividing day from night to mark the seasons. Days and years, lights warm the earth with your light.
It happened just as God said. God fashioned the 2 great lights, the brighter to mark the course of the day, the dimmer to mark the course of the night, and the divine needles night with the stars. God set them in heaven's skies to cast warm light on the earth, to rule over the day and night, and divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that his creation was beautiful and good. Evening came way to morning. That was day 4.
Waters swarm with fish and sea creatures. Let birds soar high above the earth in the broad expanse of sky.
So God created huge sea creatures, all the swarms of life in the waters, and every kind of species of flying bird, each able to reproduce its own kind. And God saw his new creation was beautiful and good, and God spoke this blessing over them.
Be fruitful and multiply. Let creatures fill the seas. Let birds reproduce and cover the earth.
Evening gave way to morning. That was day 5.
Earth, generate life, produce a vast variety of living creatures, domesticated animals, small creeping creatures, and wild animals that roam the earth.
It happened just as God said. God made earth creatures in a vast variety of species, wild animals, domesticated animals of all sizes, and small creeping creatures, each able to reproduce its own kind. God saw that his new creation was beautiful and good, and God paused.
Now let us conceive a new creation, humanity, made in our image, fashioned according to our likeness. Let us grant them authority over all the earth, the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, the domesticated animals and small creeping creatures on the earth.
So God did just that. He created humanity in his image, created them male and female. Then God blessed them and gave them his directive: be fruitful and multiply, populate the earth. I make you trustees of my estate, so care for my creation and rule over the fish of the seas, the birds of the sky, and every creature that roams across the earth.
The crown of God's creation is a new creature, a creature that can sound the heartbeat of its creator, The creature made male and female reflects God's own relational richness. The human family is to join God in the ongoing work of creation. The earth below and the sky above with all their inhabitants are too beautiful and too good to be left alone. They need the tender care and close attention that only God's favoured creature can give.
Look, I have given you every seed-bearing plant that grows on the earth, and every fruit-bearing tree. They will be your food and nourishment. As for all the wild animals, the birds in the sky, and every small creeping creature, everything that breathes the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food.
And it happened just as God said. Then God surveyed everything he made, savoring its beauty and appreciating its goodness. Evening gave way to morning. That was day 6.
In the beginning, that's where it all began. That's where God, Father, Son, and Spirit created the perfect creation, a masterpiece. And because his capacity for love was so great, he created something even more wonderful than this masterpiece of creation already in place. He created the human race, a people who would live in the world and yet be different from it. For they would be like God. They would be connected to God, exist in relationship with God, just as Father, Son, and Spirit existed in perfect fellowship together. So too, the created humanity would participate in this relationship dance. And just as God has authority over all things, including life itself, humanity would be given authority over the earth to partner with God in the joy of seeing this creation flourish and develop. This is us. This is who we are. This is who we were created to be. This is what we were created to exist for. Relationship and fellowship without the drama of selfishness and pride. Creative expression, work, cultivation, and investment without the struggle, the stress, the sweat, and the pain. So what went wrong?
Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, Did God really say, you must not eat from any tree in the garden? The woman said to the serpent, We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say, You must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die. You will not certainly die, the serpent said to the woman. For God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both were open, Then the eyes of both of them were open, and they realized that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. Then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And they hid from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. But the Lord called to the man, "Where are you?" He answered, "I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid, because I was naked, so I hid." And he said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree I commanded you not to eat from?" The man said, "The woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it." Then the Lord God said to the woman, "What is this you have done?" The woman said, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." So the Lord God said to the serpent, because you have done this,
Thank you, Jen. The woman said, "The serpent deceived me and I ate." So what really happened here? Did humanity really lose its standing before God, its place within the fellowship of the Trinity, the blessing of work without toil, because some woman convinced her husband that they should eat a unique kind of fruit? No. It was so much more than that. This event that sent humanity on a downward spiral was about so much more than a lack of self-control. It wasn't about how great the fruit looked or how wonderful it smelled. At the end of the day, the fruit was just fruit, and Adam and Eve had a paradise temple garden full of food that was pleasing to the eye and good to eat. Eve took the fruit because the enemy told a lie and convinced her it was truth. "You will not certainly die," the serpent said to the woman, "for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Did you catch the lie? He said, "You will be like God." This is a lie because the truth is they already were. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." The enemy said, "You will be like God, knowing good and evil." In other words, you can rule. But God had already created humanity in his image so that they may rule. So that they may rule the way that God rules. And God rules from out of his core character trait. He rules in love. From out of his love for creation, he rules over his creation. He rules for the good of his creation. The lie that said humanity would know good and evil really meant that they would have the power to define good and evil for themselves on their own terms. Rather than existing in a constant state of connection and fellowship to the Trinity, trusting in God to guide us into goodness, we would choose for ourselves what is good and what is evil, which is exactly what we've done. Our God-given power to rule over the earth and everything in it has been distorted and corrupted because we don't rule like God rules. We hoard power to benefit me and my tribe at the expense of you and yours. We plunder the earth's resources with very little concern about whether it flourishes or not. Our history books are full of powerful people using their power to dominate weaker, more vulnerable people in order that their own power might become greater. In the Garden of Eden, humanity failed to recognize its true identity in God. They failed to let that true identity as co-ruler with God over creation speak against the lies of the enemy, and they took hold of that lie. And every generation since accepted the lies that have been spoken over them about who they really are. Every one of us has faced this battle of identity. Who are we really? We've bought into and lived out of these false identities because of words spoken over us by our culture, by those around us, by friends or loved ones, even by our own inner voice under the influence of the enemy, speaking to us and convincing us to wear these lies about who we really are. Words like sinner, unworthy, addict, unlovable, damaged, mistake, fake, alone. Humanity began living out of these false identities that fell so far short of the identity we were given at creation. We began ruling out of these broken and distorted identities, and our world began to drown in the sin brought about by the enemies of love, selfishness, pride, hate, and even fear. Something had to be done. Something had to be done.
And I hear the Savior say, thy strength indeed is small. Child of weakness, watch and pray. Find in me thine only.
When he had finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples and crossed the Kidron Valley. On the other side there was a garden, and he and his disciples went into it. Now Judas, who betrayed him, knew the place because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas came to the garden, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and the Pharisees. They were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, Who is it you want? Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. I am he, Jesus said. And Judas the traitor was standing there with them. When Jesus said, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground. Again he asked them, Who is it that you want? Jesus of Nazareth, they said. Jesus answered, I told you that I am he. If you are looking for me, then let these men go. There is a theme that emerges in John's gospel. It's a theme that develops through Jesus' ministry as he speaks with his disciples about who he truly is. 7 times, Jesus talks about his nature, his role, and his identity, beginning with the phrase, I am. He says, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the gate for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection. I am the way, the truth, and life. I am the true vine. And while repeating this phrase throughout his gospel is a literary technique, helping us, the reader, to focus in on the theme, John is doing more than simply engaging this as a language tool. He's hoping to spark our memory of another time that this phrase is used. In Exodus 3:14, Moses is standing before God, whose presence has become manifest in the burning bush. And God sends Moses back to Egypt so that he can work through him to bring liberation and freedom to Israel. While he is meeting with God, Moses asks a question about God's identity. What if they ask who sent me? Moses says. What if they ask me your name? And God responds by revealing his divine name. I am who I am. And so these 7 statements of Jesus that begin with this phrase, this same phrase, and other references to this divine name throughout John's gospel, all culminate in this scene in the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus is approached by the Roman soldiers and the officials. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, who is it you want? Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. I am he, Jesus said. When Jesus said, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground. Why did they fall? Jesus didn't push them. Jesus didn't charge at them. Jesus simply stood before them and acknowledged who he was with echoes of this divine name, I am. Think about it. Jesus, who is God in flesh, came to earth, bound himself to humanity by becoming a human, and lived a life that was 100% sold out, loyal to the Father's will. He lived the life that we were created to live, one whose interactions both with people and creation flowed out of his core identity, God in flesh. And bearing the very image of God, the core characteristic that governed his mind and his actions was love. And so here we have Jesus in the garden with no bodyguards, just the disciples. And they come for him with weapons. Jesus is unarmed, as if he even needed weapons. Right? He's the creator of heaven and earth. He's the creator and sustainer of life itself. They didn't stand a chance against him. If he chose to fight back, there's no way they could have stood up against him. They didn't stand a chance. Except that in this moment, he simultaneously reveals his divine identity at the very point that he lays down his life. There was no fight. When one of his disciples attempted to defend him, Jesus rebukes him. Jesus, God in flesh, the ruler of all things, said, let me show you how power is used in my kingdom. Let me show you how real love works. And he surrendered himself into the hands of those who would ultimately crucify him. Let me show you how real love works.
Lord, and change the leper's spots and melt the heart of stone.
Then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the place of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, they did not enter the palace, because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" "If he were not a criminal," they replied, "we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." "But we have no right to execute anyone," they objected. This took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to die. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asked, or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it you have done?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place." "You are king then," said Pilate. Jesus answered, "You say that I am king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into this world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." "What is truth?" retorted Pilate. With this he went out again to the Jews gathered there and said, "I find no basis for a charge against him. But it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of the Passover. Do you want me to release the King of the Jews?" They shouted back, "No, not him. Give us Barabbas." Now Barabbas had taken part in an uprising. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They clothed him in a purple robe and went up to him again and again, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they slapped him in the face. Once more Pilate came out and said to the Jews gathered there, "Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him." When Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." As soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify, crucify!" But Pilate answered, "You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him." The Jewish leaders insisted, "We have a law, and according to that law he must die, because he claimed to be the Son of God." When Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid. He went back inside the palace. "Where do you come from?" he asked Jesus. But Jesus gave him no answer. "Do you refuse to speak to me?" Pilate said. "Don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jewish leaders kept shouting, "If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar." When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judge's seat at a place known as the Stone Pavement, which in Aramaic is Gabbatha. It was the day of preparation of Passover. It was about noon. "Here is your king," Pilate said to the Jews. But they shouted, take him away, crucify him." "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar," the chief priests answered. Finally, Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified. So the soldiers took charge of Jesus, carrying his own cross. He went out to the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. There they crucified him with two others, one on each side, and Jesus in the middle. Pilate had a notice prepared and fastened to the cross. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Many of the Jews read this sign, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and the sign was written in Aramaic, Latin, and Greek. The chief priests of the Jews protested to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Jews, but that this man claimed to be King of the Jews." Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written."
In the darkness we were waiting, without hope, without light. Till from heaven you came running, there was mercy in your eyes. To fulfill the law and prophets, to a virgin came the word. From the hill of endless glory, to a cradle in the dirt. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. To reveal the kingdom coming, and to reconcile the lost, to redeem the whole creation. You did not despise the cross, for even in your suffering, you saw to the other side, knowing this was your salvation. Jesus, for your sake you died. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings.
So Jesus is taken from the garden, and he stood trial before the high priests and the Roman governing authorities. For what? Depending on what gospel account you read will depend on what details it focuses on. But it seems that when we really get down to the heart of the matter, Jesus was on trial because of the claims he made about who he was. He was on trial because the crowds were beginning to make some significant claims about who Jesus was. Messiah, King, Son of God. And Jesus wasn't denying them. How dare he make such a claim? How dare he listen to the claims that people make about him and refuse to deny them or correct them? How dare he reject who he really is and walk about Jerusalem living as though this really is who he is? The ironic thing here is Jesus was put on trial for living out of this so-called false identity. When isn't that really humanity's crime? Isn't that really our crime? The absurd thing is that even though Pilate seems to recognize something of who he was, even if only in part, it's clear that he was uncomfortable, or at the very least conflicted about this whole thing. And the very people who were called out once more to be a nation of priests, representatives of God to the world, witnesses of his reign and rule over the world, over the whole earth. These are the people who fail to really see and recognize Jesus' true identity as their king, their true king. They find him guilty and they have him nailed to a Roman executioning tool. And so when Jesus was crucified, Pilate, maybe because of his conflicted state, maybe because he didn't really care for the Jews and liked messing with them, he's made a sign. It was a description of the person who hung on the cross, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. And while the Jews weren't really happy with this, they wanted it to state that he was just claiming to be their king. The truth had already been written. Because not only was Jesus the King of the Jews, he was King of the whole world. You see, the truth of the cross is that the cross wasn't made for Jesus. The truth of the cross is that it was made for me. The fellowship and the relationship that humanity enjoyed with God, with creation, with each other was broken when we rejected the identity that we were created for. When we rebelled against God and his idea of what was good and what was evil, and we decided for ourselves, and we're still deciding. We bought into the lies of the enemy in the fall, and we've been doing it ever since. And our world is drowning in sin. And so God took on himself the punishment that we are due, because instead of trusting in our loving Creator and living in the truth of who he is and who he created us to be, we pursued a lie. Collectively as humankind and individually as well. So Jesus was crucified for taking claim of a false identity. That's our crime, not his. But when I look to the cross, when I recognize the truth of his identity, I'm at the same time confronted with the truth of who I really am. Who I am in my foolish decisions. Who I am in my selfishness and my pride. Who I am in my brokenness. And I'm humbled. And I fall before my King, who conquered the evil within me with his love. Because I have the opportunity to nail it all to the cross with Jesus, to have my life that is dripping in sin washed clean, made pure by his sacrificial love for me, and have my eyes opened to a new possibility. And that new possibility came into focus for the disciples and for us with the resurrection. But for now, let's stay in this place where we recognize who Jesus really is, and in so doing, discover the truth of the cross.
Price of life's demand. blood of Jesus shed for me. Oh, what sacrifice that saved my life. Yes, the blood, it is my victory. Savior, Son, Holy One, slain thou I can live. See the Lamb, the great I am, who takes away my sin. Oh, the blood of Jesus washes me. Oh, the blood of Jesus shed for me. What a sacrifice that saved my life. Yes, the blood, it is my victory. Oh, praise the one who paid my debt and raised his life up from the dead. Oh, praise the one who paid my debt and raised his life up from the dead. Oh, praise the one who paid my debt and raised this life up from the dead. Oh, praise the one who paid my debt and raised this life up from the dead. Jesus paid it all to him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain, he washed it white as snow.
The music's going to continue playing, but our service is complete. And we look forward to Easter Sunday, Resurrection Sunday, when we come back and celebrate that this was not the end of the story. But I want to invite you to remain in this space as long as you want to stay and focus on the cross. Focus on what happened on the cross, what caused the cross to be required, and what it means for you here today. So the music's going to continue to play, as I said, and I invite you to sit in this space, connect with Jesus, pray to Jesus, and when you're ready, you can leave. Thank you for coming and participating this morning. We look forward to seeing you on Sunday.